One moment can change everything. It sounds simple, and at the same time, frighteningly straightforward, because we are used to looking for big signs on the horizon. Loud events, monumental decisions, visible victories. But what if the fullness of life is not in the sum of loud episodes, but in the ability to be present with what already exists? Allow yourself to pause for a moment and listen to the quiet voice within. It knows the language of the small things. Often we feel an emptiness passing through the days, and we try to fill it with bright experiences, trips, changes in relationships, sudden impulses. All this can shine, but it doesn't always warm. The main problem is not that the world offers little, but that we forget to live here and now. We wander in anticipation of someday, and as a result, we miss what happens between today's dawn and today's sunset. Let's be honest, the fullness of life is not always about crazy excitement. It's the ability to take care of yourself, to respect your boundaries, to reconcile with the fact that some parts of us do not require proof. It's a subtle art to hear your own fatigue and respond to it with gentleness, not drama. When the inner space begins to fill with calmness, the external starts to reflect this stability, like a lake that accepts the sky and returns it with a quiet surface. If doubt lives within you now, as if you are doing something wrong, notice, sometimes the path to depth goes through slowing down. This is not a sign of weakness, but a form of wisdom. Allow yourself to breathe more slowly, not as a retreat, but as a way to see the details that were previously dissolved in haste. Here, in this little thing, rare joy hides. A cup of tea, a ray of sunshine on your palm, a conversation without a purpose. They don't have to announce their value loudly. They simply exist, and therein lies their strength. I promise, if you allow yourself to learn to live in the moment, an inner transformation will begin to occur, quiet and steady. This transition is not like a fireworks show. Rather, it's like morning light that slowly melts the chill of night. You will notice that anxiety draws less attention, that the need to prove yourself recedes, that simple stability brings depth. This does not negate desires and dreams, but changes their tone. They become muted and harmonious with you, rather than imposed from the outside. Imagine yourself as a tree, rooted in the ground. The external winds come and go, but the roots remain where they are warm and secure. Living life fully means allowing the roots to nourish growth, even if the crown does not always rush to the stars. It is peaceful courage, being yourself in small things, respecting your little rituals, without demanding recognition from them. This approach frees you from constant competition with the flow of life and teaches you to accept its nuances. This hook is not a loud call for radical change. It is an invitation to start listening. And when you start to hear, the path unfolds not as a map with a final destination, but as a series of quiet decisions to trust the morning light, to maintain calm amidst the noise, to allow yourself to be imperfect. Each such step is like a breath that brings you home. Let this breath be the beginning. Allow yourself to slow down. A small inspiration. Quiet confidence. Why is this important right now? The world, which once seemed measured and predictable, has accelerated, but not always towards meaning. Speed has brought new opportunities, but along with them, a scattering of attention and a constant impression of time scarcity. In such an atmosphere, it is easy to lose touch with oneself, as if a compass covered in rust no longer points north. And so now is the time to return to simplicity, the time to learn to pay attention to what is around. The contrast between the noisy external reality and the quiet internal need has become especially noticeable. On one side, an endless stream of offers and stimuli. On the other, a quiet need for stability. In this difference lies an important signal. Not all external changes lead to internal fullness. Sometimes depth comes through reducing noise, through choosing a few meaningful actions instead of numerous superficial movements. Imagine an evening shore and the sea, which slowly recedes and returns. The waves bring in and take away, but the shore remains. This is why it is important to learn to value the moment, so our lives do not turn into a constant waiting for the next wave. We choose to be on the shore, perceiving each tide, each sound as part of a whole. There is comfort in this. Not every event needs to be grand to matter. You are not alone in your feelings. Many people experience a slight disappointment that big plans do not always bring the desired fullness. Often, behind external success lies fatigue, an inability to rejoice in simple things, a habit of measuring the value of life by a scale of achievements. This feeling unites us. We all seek our quiet horizons, where we can stop, breathe, and feel whole. The emotions you are experiencing right now, anxiety, fatigue, slight dissatisfaction, are not enemies, but signs on the path. They suggest that something inside is demanding attention. Allow yourself to bivouac with them, viewing them like clouds over a field. They come and go, sometimes bringing rain, sometimes providing shade. Attention to these states is the first step towards living with greater fullness, because a new awareness begins within. Using metaphors of nature, we can notice how the internal climate affects the external landscape of life. When there is calm inside, the world around seems more welcoming. When there is a storm within, the external world reflects it with irritation and noise. This is why the importance of the topic now is not in the fashion for self-improvement, but in the necessity of reclaiming one's inner ground, where one can grow freely. It is not about ideals, but about true resilience. In approaching this topic, I want to set the tone. Quiet, but serious. There are no loud promises of instant transformation here. There is an invitation to a long, gentle process that makes life richer, not through addition, but through clarification. Treat this like a morning forest, slowly, with respect for those around, and with attention to your own breathing. In the following sections, we will gently explore what a full life is, the myths that hinder, and the simple practices that restore connection with oneself. But first, a pause. Listen to your body. Where is the tension right now? Where is the peace? Notice these places. Allow yourself to be here and now. This is the beginning, and in it, tremendous power. Let this be your first step, quiet and alive. Allow yourself to notice. Be a gentle observer. First, note this. The fullness of life is not a universal measure, but a personal landscape. We grow amidst stories, some of successes, some of losses, ideals that sometimes appear as a beacon's light from a distance. But as we get closer, we find that the beacon does not illuminate the entire bay. It serves as a guide, not a map. Myths about a full life often attribute to it loud forms, endless travels, a career as proof, passionate romances that turn weekdays into cinema. These images are beautiful, but they do not encompass the whole truth. True fullness is not built solely from visible victories. It lives in how we relate to ourselves in every hour lived. Imagine a morning forest. Many perceive it as a stage for feats, but real life begins in the silence between steps, in the breath of animals, in the drop of dew clinging to a leaf. Human fullness is not about constant swings, but about the ability to notice these little things and allow them to fill us. I remember a person who dreamed of traveling all his life. He saved money, saw the world, but often returned with a sense of emptiness. It turned out that during his trips, he didn't allow himself to stop, as if every country had to fill what was lacking inside. Only when he returned to simple morning rituals, a cup of tea in silence, a walk in the nearby park, did a new fullness arise. Calm, unflappable, like the surface of a lake without wind. This is not a protest against bold actions or new experiences. It is an acknowledgement that fullness feeds on the ability to be in contact with oneself. The practice here is simple and gentle. Start with a small question each morning. What do I need today? And listen to the answer. It may be quieter than expected, but it is honest. Allow yourself to shorten your to-do list, not because the world demands it, but because you hear the inner rhythm calling for care. It's like trimming dry branches. At first it seems that the tree will become poorer, but in reality, it receives more light for growth. When myths of fullness meet reality, a gentle choice is important. What stories do you choose to carry forward? You can continue to collect loud trophies, but if it's empty inside, trophies won't warm you. Allow yourself to rethink the concept of success. It can be measured by the silence at the end of the day, the feeling that you have come home to yourself. Small acts of self-care are not selfishness, but a foundation. They create that very resilience that allows external events to be decoration rather than a substitute. At the end of this part, a quiet invitation. Soften your internal list of demands. Allow yourself to believe that fullness can be gentle and measured. Feel the breath. It carries a little more meaning than any external victory. Take a step unobtrusively. Start small and watch as new warmth arises within. Allow this warmth to quietly guide you forward. The ability to be in the moment is like the art of listening to the water in a brook. Its sound changes, but if you are attuned, you hear every note. Being in the moment is not a dramatic act, but a constant, gentle practice, noticing your breath, feeling your body, accepting the sensation of now without immediately trying to change it. It's like learning to read the language of a gentle breeze. Sometimes it brings freshness, sometimes it warns of a storm, but it always speaks of what is happening right now. I met a woman who would sit on a bench in the park every morning with a thermos of tea. She wasn't rushing through a to-do list. She was learning to be present with the morning light. A year later, her life hadn't radically changed on the outside. The same job, the same responsibilities, but her inner climate had transformed. She began to react more calmly to stress, learned to let go of small irritations, because each morning she returned to a simple ritual and was filled with quiet confidence. This is the ability to be in the moment, small practices that shape an inner rhythm. The practical step here doesn't require great effort. Start with 3 deep breaths that you take intentionally before doing something, making breakfast, an important call, or replying to an email. These breaths are like an anchor that brings you back to the present. Another way is to mindfully eat one piece of food, such as a slice of apple. Feel the texture, the taste, the sound of biting. Allow these simple actions to become a meditation in motion. They don't take much time, but they create a bridge between the inner and outer. As you observe yourself, Pay attention to the habits that pull you into tomorrow. Constant future planning, dreams of more that become a form of avoiding the present moment. This doesn't mean giving up on dreams. It means learning to frame them in a way that nourishes rather than consumes the now. Like a ship that holds its course, but never forgets to check the map and adjust the sails, you can pursue your goals without losing connection to what is happening at this moment. Then, a quiet reflection. Notice how your self-care changes when you pay attention to the present. The world won't become more predictable, but you will become more resilient to its noise. At the end of this section, a gentle impulse. Notice your breath right now. Let it become the gateway to the moment. A small action. Warm confidence. Self-care is not a list of rules, but a dialogue with your body and soul. It's like tending to a garden. Some plants need pruning, others need regular watering, and some need a warm corner and shade during the heat of summer. The approach to oneself should be just as sensory and attentive. We often confuse care with buying bright things or making radical changes. But true care is the consistency of simple actions that nourish you from within. Remember the story of a neighbor who, after losing a loved one, realized that he needed the basics: sleep, food, movement. He stopped ignoring these basic needs, considering them trivial, and that became the beginning of a small recovery. He started cooking soups, walking in the mornings, and allowed himself to ask for help. At first, these steps seemed insignificant, but over time, they formed a reliable support. This shows that self-care begins with simple habits and patience with the process. Practical steps can be formulated as 3 pillars: body, attention, boundaries. For the body, regular sleep, at least minimal physical activity, and food that you truly enjoy. For attention, breaks during the day just to rest your eyes and mind. For boundaries, the ability to say no calmly and quietly to preserve space for what is important. Don't demand perfection from yourself, but offer yourself continuity, like daily watering for a potted plant. Notice that self-care requires gentleness in evaluating your steps. Sometimes we forgive others for weakness and demand strength from ourselves. Try to replace self-reproach with a question: what do I really need right now? And listen to the answer without haste. It could be sleep, a conversation with a friend, a walk, or simply silence. Allow yourself to make this choice consciously. This approach teaches you to trust your own body and feelings. The final thought here is not about rules, but about attention. Self-care is an act of love that often starts small. Sit for a minute and imagine that warmth is growing inside you, not from an external fact, but from your own care. Take a small step today. Allow yourself to be caring towards yourself. Simplicity is not asceticism. It is liberation from everything unnecessary that obscures the light. Imagine a home where every item is in its place, where the air is free from excess weight, where light passes through the window unobstructed. Simplicity in life is built the same way, by reducing noise, minimizing commitments, and having a clearer understanding of what truly matters. This does not mean rejecting beauty. On the contrary, it becomes more noticeable when there is less clutter around. I told a friend about how he decided to get rid of things that did not bring joy. He started with a small box. Items that were kept just in case went into the box, and soon he found it easier to breathe in his own apartment. The inner space was freed, and along with it came ideas and time for what truly matters. This is a simple story, but it reflects a principle. Liberation from the excess creates space for presence and creativity. The practice of simplifying is not an immediate throw everything away, but a gentle review. Choose one area of life, home, mail, calendar, and leave only what brings benefit or joy. Reassess your habits. Opt out of subscriptions that take up time. Turn off notifications that can go unnoticed. Create rituals that fill you instead of depleting you. Tea in silence, a walk without a phone, an evening of reading. These rituals become the walls of a small refuge within the everyday. An important element of simplicity is the art of saying no without guilt. Every time you decline empty commitments, you say yes to your time and attention. It's like cleaning a shore of debris. The shore again becomes a place where you can walk barefoot. The freed space allows you to notice the little things, the smell of bread, the sound of autumn leaves, the smile of a passerby, and they begin to matter. As you complete this part, feel the calm that comes with simplification. Do not strive for perfection. Just create a place where you can be. Start small. 1 box, 1 hour without a phone, 1 loving habit. Allow this space to become your refuge. A gentle step, and freedom is a little closer. Inner stability is that quiet core that withstands external fluctuations. Like an ancient tree with roots that go deep, we can develop a foundation that makes us less susceptible to the winds of circumstance. This does not mean becoming an impenetrable stone, but rather learning to flexibly absorb the blows while maintaining our own axis. Stability is born from persistent rituals, from caring for the body, from the ability to return to oneself in moments of anxiety. Here is one story. A man who went through a series of failures in business discovered a new source of strength within himself. Regular dawn walks and gratitude letters every week. He did not seek instant solutions. He built a foundation that gradually restored his inner peace. It was not a dramatic transformation, but his resilience became a magnet for opportunities. When the inner soil is dense enough, it is easier to grow something valuable. The practical steps to stability are simple, but they require silence and consistency. Create 3 small rituals that will bring you back home to yourself. This could be a morning tea in silence, an evening diary entry, or a 10-minute walk without your phone. Notice how in a month, these rituals will begin to change the quality of your days. Anxiety will become less intrusive. Decisions will be more meaningful. Furthermore, pay attention to your circle of acquaintances. People who respect your space and support you become part of your support system. Reflection here is important. Inner stability does not make you closed off from feelings. It teaches you to accept and process them without panic. Feel your breath when anxiety arises. Do not push it away. Just observe. It is like facing a storm. If you have shelter and a plan, the storm will not destroy the house. Inner stability is that shelter. In the end, a light push. Start with 1 ritual and maintain it for a month. Notice the changes. Let a small sequence become the beginning of a deep foundation. Trust your feeling. It knows the way. Here, in the practical part, I invite you to a gentle experiment. Not for the sake of perfection, but to test how small, repeated gestures can change the tone of the day. Try to perceive these suggestions not as a strict plan, but as a set of simple rituals, like a cup of tea that you can enjoy in the morning if you wish. Let them become gentle supports that gradually form the inner soil on which calmness grows. 4 simple rituals that can fit into any day. They don't take much time, but create a structure of presence. 1. Morning anchor, 5 to 10 minutes. Upon waking, do not dive into the flood of notifications. Allow yourself 3 deep breaths and 2 slow exhales. Place your palms on your chest and abdomen. Feel the warmth of the touch and let your attention settle. Do not seek great wisdom. Simply pay attention to your breathing and to how you feel right now. It might be a quiet gratitude for the chance to open your eyes, or a simple observation. Right now, I need more peace. 2. Small moments of presence during the day. Choose 2 to 3 simple actions that you turn into mini meditations. A cup of tea, a meal, a walk to the nearest store. During these actions, be attentive to the senses. Smell, taste, texture, steps. If your thoughts wander, gently return. Do not judge yourself for distractions. Just return with curiosity to what is happening. It's like training the muscle of attention. At first, it's easy. Then it becomes habitual. 3. The threshold of the day. Transition home, 10 to 15 minutes. Upon arriving home from work or finishing a workflow, try to have a transition ritual. Take off your shoes, open a window, wash your hands mindfully. Make a small list of 3 things you appreciate today. These small gestures help separate the external hustle from the quietness of home and bring the body back to its rhythm. 4. Evening mind cleanse, 10 to 20 minutes. Before bed, find time for a short reflection. Write down 1 joy of the day and 1 observation about what you would like to slightly change tomorrow. A couple of minutes of gratitude for the little things, and then softly turn off the screen to 60 minutes before sleep. This ritual helps the body and mind free themselves from the day's noise and gently prepare for sleep. Microplan for the week. How to integrate rituals without pressure. Day 1-2. Choose 1 ritual and observe how it fits into your day. Be mindful of feelings. Jot down in a few words what changed. Day 3-4. Add a 2nd ritual. Maintain softness. There's no need to do everything perfectly. Simply return to the practice. Day 5-7. Strengthen both rituals. Make a short evening entry about how your mood and energy level are changing. Rate not on a scale of achievements, but on a scale of feelings. Calmer, less distracted, happier from the simple. How to track progress and maintain inspiration. Simple mood scale. Each evening, note 1 word or number from 1 to 5 that describes your day. This is not an exam, but a map that will reveal trends over time. Pay attention to sequences. 3 calm days in a row is a sign of stability. 2. Journal of small victories. A long entry is not needed, just 3 lines. What went well? What was difficult? What you want to repeat tomorrow? After a month, such entries create a sense of story. You see how warmth accumulates from small things. 3. Visual habit tracker. A sheet of paper, a calendar, or an app. Mark the days when you returned to chosen rituals. A line of check marks accumulates not pressure, but trust in your own rhythm. 4. Weekly reflection. Take 15 minutes for a walk or silence. Read your entries from the week and ask yourself a gentle question. What have I truly gained in these 7 days? Answer without haste and without accusations. How to maintain inspiration. Change the forms of rituals to avoid boredom. Sometimes replace morning tea with a short walk. Sometimes listen to your favorite music while cooking. Surround yourself with reminders that evoke kindness, notes, photos, scents. They work better than willpower decisions. Share experiences with a close person or in a small community. Warm exchange of ideas and imperfections fuels the desire to continue. Allow yourself breaks. If you miss a few days, do not dramatize. Let yourself start again with a smile. Small safeguards against fatigue. If a habit feels heavy, reduce it to a minimum. 1 breath, 30 seconds of walking, half a cup of tea. Often, visible progress starts with very small actions. Notice, consistency is more important than intensity. Better to do a little bit daily than to make rare, big efforts. How to approach intentions and goals. Do not abandon your dreams, but connect softness to them. Formulate goals as desires, not as measures of your own worth. Periodically ask yourself, do I choose this goal because it nourishes me? If the answer is warm, continue moving towards it. If it's cold, reconsider. Goals should resonate with inner stability, not replace it. Final note, try to start today with something small. Even 1 minute of morning presence can be the first step on a long journey. Allow yourself to move without rushing, with patience and gratitude for each quiet day. If this idea resonates with you, subscribe to the channel and like the video to stay close and not miss the next day of inspiration. Let a light feeling of presence arise in your chest, quiet yet reliable. As we conclude this conversation about fullness, simplicity, and inner stability, it is important to return to the metaphor of roots and shore. Life does not require us to be in constant flight. It asks for presence. The feeling of completeness here arises not from the quantity of achievements, but from the quality of presence in those very small moments that once seemed insignificant. A warm cup, an evening walk, a quiet note, all of this becomes the continuous fabric that creates a home within us. Summarizing the key thoughts, I would like to highlight 4 threads that connect the entire narrative. The first thread is attention to the moment. It brings us back to the present and reduces the need to live in expectation. The second is self-care as a daily dialogue. Simple attention to sleep, food, movement, and boundaries forms the foundation. The third is simplifying space and commitments. When there is less noise around, subtle joys become more audible. The fourth is inner stability. Rituals and constancy provide support that allows not only to withstand storms, but also to embrace quiet days with gratitude. These threads do not imply an instant transformation. They are more akin to a long, patient weaving process, where each repetition brings us closer to the fabric's image. Sometimes the process may seem slow or even imperceptible. In such moments, be attentive to what has already changed, even if it seems small. Less irritation, a bit more clarity in the morning, the ability to sit with a book 10 minutes longer. These little things are signs of growth. It is important to remember, fullness does not exclude the desire for change. It does not contradict dreams and aspirations. Rather, it alters the tone of those aspirations. Desires become softer, less demanding, more attuned to the inner climate. When there is inner stability, ambitions turn into companions on the path, rather than a lifebuoy for emptiness. Allow yourself to accept imperfection as part of the journey. Often, we think that fullness will arrive when everything is perfect. But the ideal is a mirage. Life is a constant art of adapting, letting go, and returning to oneself. In this lies great freedom. By letting go of the pursuit of the ideal, we gain more space for joy. When it comes to the practical side, remember, start small, with one morning anchor, with 1 hour a week for yourself. with 1 minute of attention to your breath. Small steps accumulate. In a month, you will be able to look back and notice the lines of new habits that have quietly changed the order of your days. In a year, these habits will become part of the soil upon which more conscious decisions grew. Let the final feeling be one of warmth and quiet hope. Life is not a rush to the finish line. It is a long conversation with oneself, where sometimes it is enough just to return home. View this journey as a series of gentle invitations. Invite yourself for a cup of tea. Invite yourself for a walk without purpose. Invite yourself for a restful night. These invitations are not an obligation, but an act of kindness to yourself. And when you want to share your experience or seek support, remember, you are not alone. Subscribe to the channel if you want to continue together, and like the video to stay close and not miss a new day of inspiration. In closing, take a deep breath and allow yourself to exhale with gratitude, quietly, like the breath that remains after a long evening. May this breath become your gentle guiding star, soft and constant,